The lights inside the mining station hummed with a dull sound. Metal walls stretched endlessly, filled with the noise of machines. Workers moved like tired shadows, finishing their long shifts. But one man stood apart from them all, Ethan. His face was pale, his eyes red, his hands shaking. For 3 days he had not slept. He forced himself to stay awake with strong coffee, bitter pills, and even ice-cold water splashed on his face. The others laughed at him at first, thinking he was only nervous, but Ethan was not laughing. He sat in the corner of the mess hall, whispering again and again to anyone who came close, "Please, don't let me fall asleep," he begged. "When I sleep, they come." The other workers exchanged confused looks. Some smiled nervously, others rolled their eyes. They thought maybe he had been working too long in the dark tunnels of the asteroid. Maybe he was simply losing his mind. But Ethan's voice carried a fear so real, so sharp that no one could ignore it. It was not the voice of a liar, not the voice of a clown. It was the voice of a man standing on the edge of something terrible. The station's medic, Dr. Lin, tried to calm him. "Ethan, you need sleep, you are shaking. Your heart rate is too fast, you can collapse any moment," she said. But Ethan grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his red eyes wide. "No! You don't understand. If I sleep, they will find me. They will come through me." Dr. Lin pulled her hand away. Unsettled by the cold grip, she turned to the captain, Ramirez, who stood watching silently. Ramirez was not a man who believed in stories. He believed in numbers, schedules, and metal, not in monsters hiding in dreams. Still, something about Ethan's words made even him uneasy. The fear in Ethan's face was not normal fear. It was the kind of fear that came from experience, from memory. Later that night, the crew gathered in the common room. The screen flickered with old movies to keep everyone's mind off the long hours. Ethan sat in the corner again, his head dropping lower and lower. His body screamed for rest, but his mind fought against it. Every time his eyelids closed for more than a second, he jerked himself awake, gasping. One of the younger miners, Mark, laughed. "Look at him. Like a child scared of the dark," he said. But before anyone else could laugh, Ethan suddenly slammed his fist on the table. The sound echoed through the room. "Making everyone jump, I am not scared of the dark," he shouted. "I am scared of what waits inside it." The room fell silent. Everyone could feel the weight of his words. Ethan finally explained in a broken, trembling voice. He told them about the first time he had seen them. It was only a week ago when he had gone to sleep like normal. He dreamed of a vast black field, endless and empty. At first it was quiet, but then he heard footsteps, soft, slow, coming closer in the dream. He could not move. He could not speak. Shadows began to appear. Tall and thin with no faces, they stood far away, but he could feel their eyes on him. He knew they were not just part of a dream. He knew they were real, waiting for him to fall deeper. When he woke, his body was cold, his sheets wet with sweat. He tried to forget it, tried to laugh at himself. But every night after that, they returned. Every time the shadows stood closer, every time he felt less like a dreamer and more like a prisoner. Now, after 3 days without sleep, his voice was almost gone, his lips cracked, his hands trembling as he begged again. "Please, please don't let me sleep. If I close my eyes even for a moment, they will come closer. And one day, they won't stop at me. They will step through me." Into this world, the crew stared at him in silence. Some laughed nervously to hide their fear, but deep inside, no one wanted to admit what they felt. The way the lights flickered when Ethan spoke. The way the air grew colder when he closed his eyes. The strange marks, like handprints, burned faintly on the wall near his bunk. Something was not right. Something was watching, and it was waiting for Ethan to fall asleep. The warning had been given, but no one yet understood how real it was. The night cycle of the mining station was quiet. Most of the crew had gone to their bunks, leaving only a few awake. The hum of machines echoed through the halls, steady and calm, but inside Ethan's cabin, nothing was calm. He sat on his bed, his body trembling, his eyes fighting to stay open. His skin was pale, his breath shallow, his mind weak. For 3 days he had kept himself awake, but no human could fight sleep forever. The captain had ordered him to rest. Dr. Lin had begged him. Even his closest friend, Mark, had tried to convince him. But Ethan shook his head again and again. "No. If I sleep, they will come. Please don't let me sleep." Mark sighed, sitting on the chair across from him. "You're killing yourself, Ethan," he whispered. "You haven't eaten. You haven't rested. This is madness, but Ethan's answer was the same. Madness is letting them in. Minutes passed, the silence heavy. Mark leaned back. His own eyes half closed from exhaustion. Ethan tried to speak again, but his words slurred, his body sagged. Finally, against his will, his eyelids closed. At first it was peaceful. Darkness wrapped around him like a soft blanket. But then the peace shattered. The air grew heavy, thick. He was standing in a vast black field, endless and empty. No stars, no light, no sound. Only the echo of his own breath, and then the footsteps, soft, slow, steady, coming closer. Ethan's chest tightened. His legs felt like stone. He could not run. His voice was locked inside his throat. He turned his head slowly, and there they were, tall shadows, thin and stretched, their bodies twisting unnaturally. They had no faces, but Ethan could feel their eyes. Cold, empty, hungry eyes. The shadows moved with strange, jerking motions, as if every step broke the rules of nature. They did not run, they did not rush. They only walked forward slowly, carefully, as if they had all the time in the world. One of them lifted a long hand, its fingers like black smoke. Stretching too far, it pointed at Ethan, and though no mouth was visible, he heard the whisper. Soon, Ethan gasped, his body jerking awake, his eyes flew open. His lungs burned as if he had been drowning. Mark leaped from his chair, startled. Ethan! What happened? Ethan clutched his chest, sweat dripping from his face. They're closer, he whispered. They're closer than before. Mark frowned, glancing around the small cabin, but his frown turned to fear when he saw it. On the metal wall near Ethan's bed was a mark, a handprint, long and thin, burned into the steel. Mark's voice shook. Ethan, how is that possible? The rest of the crew was called. They crowded into the cabin, whispering nervously. Captain Ramirez touched the strange print with his glove. The metal was cold, but the shape was clear, like something had pressed into it from another world. Dr. Lynn stepped back, her face pale. This is impossible, she said, but her voice carried no confidence. Ethan sat on the bed, his hands shaking. I told you, he whispered, they are real. Every time I sleep, they get closer. Every time they leave something behind. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. No one wanted to believe him, but the burned mark on the wall was proof no one could explain. That night, they decided to watch him. 2 men stayed in his room while he tried to resist sleep. The others waited outside, tense and silent. Hours passed. Ethan's head fell forward, his eyes closing again. This time they saw it. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. Their breath turned white in the air. And then, a faint shadow moved across the wall. Thin, tall, wrong, one of the men shouted, shaking Ethan awake, and just like that, the shadow vanished. The lights returned, the air grew warm again. Ethan woke with a scream. They're almost here! You see it now, don't you? You see them. The men said nothing, but the terror in their eyes was enough. The captain called for an emergency meeting. The crew sat in silence as Ramirez spoke. We cannot ignore this. Something is happening here. Something dangerous, he said. He looked at Ethan, who sat shaking in the corner. You must not sleep, not until we understand what this is. Ethan raised his head slowly, his voice trembling. They won't stop. They are waiting. Every time I close my eyes, they get stronger. If I fall into deep sleep, they will step through me. Into our world. The room was silent. Every crew member could feel it. The weight of those words. The shadows were not only inside Ethan's dreams anymore. They were reaching out piece by piece. The first glimpse had come, and it was only the beginning. The mining station no longer felt safe. Every hallway carried a chill. Every corner seemed darker than before. The crew tried to continue their work, but whispers filled the air. Everyone had seen the strange burned handprint. Everyone had felt the cold when Ethan slipped into sleep. No one could laugh anymore. Ethan walked slowly through the corridors, his eyes heavy but wild. His hands shook, his skin pale. He looked like a man carrying a curse, and maybe he was. The captain ordered 2 people to stay near Ethan at all times. They tried to keep him awake with coffee, energy shots, even sharp pain. But his body was failing. Every hour he grew weaker. Every step heavier still, he begged them, don't let me fall asleep, not even for a second. If I do, they will come again. That night more signs appeared. Strange marks were found near the airlocks. Long, thin scratches that no tool could have made. The camera near Corridor 6 showed static for exactly 13 seconds. When the feed returned, the wall behind Ethan's bunk had a new burned shape. It was not a hand this time. It was a face, stretched and twisted, mouth wide open in silent scream. Dr. Lynn studied it with shaking hands. "This should not be possible," she whispered. But even her science could not explain what everyone was seeing. The crew began to turn against one another. Some wanted Ethan locked in the medical bay, sedated, studied. Others argued he should be thrown out the airlock before the shadows grew stronger. Ethan heard their whispers and only shook his head. "They are already here. You cannot stop them by killing me. I am just the door." His words made the crew fall silent, because deep down they feared he was right. On the fourth night without sleep, Ethan collapsed. The crew rushed to catch him. Holding his body upright, his eyes fluttered. His lips moved without sound. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Lights flickered, alarms buzzed without reason. And then they saw it. A shadow stretched along the floor. Long and thin, it crawled across the metal like spilled ink. One of the crew, Mark, stepped back in shock. But the shadow moved toward him fast, unnatural. Mark screamed as cold touched his leg. It felt like fire and ice together, burning through his skin. The others grabbed him, pulled him away. The moment Ethan was shaken awake, the shadow vanished. But Mark's leg bore a mark, a hand-shaped burn. Black against his skin, panic spread through the crew. No one doubted anymore. The shadows were real, and they were no longer tied only to Ethan's dreams. They were pushing into reality piece by piece. The captain gathered everyone in the mess hall. His face hard, his voice cold. "This is not a joke anymore," he said. "Something is trying to come through Ethan. We either find a way to stop it, or none of us will leave this station alive." Ethan lifted his head, his voice low. "You can't stop them with guns, or walls or fire. They don't care about doors or locks. The only way to stop them is to keep me awake. But how long can you stay awake?" One of the crew shouted, "You're dying already." Ethan's answer was silence, because he knew the truth. No one could stay awake forever. Later, in the quiet of his cabin, Ethan spoke to Mark. Mark still limped, his burned leg wrapped in bandages. "They touched me." "Ethan," he said in a broken voice, "it was cold, so cold. Like something from another world. If they can reach me once, they can reach me again." Ethan stared at him with hollow eyes. "They will," he whispered. "Next time they won't just leave a mark. Next time they will take you." Mark swallowed hard, fear choking him. "What do they want?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice barely a breath. "They want to cross over. They are waiting for me to sleep deep enough. When that happens, they won't just haunt me. They will walk here." Among us, the days grew worse. Scratches appeared on walls no one touched. Whispers echoed through empty corridors. Some crew swore they saw tall shapes moving in the distance. Every hour, the shadows pressed harder. Every hour, Ethan's body grew weaker. And yet he fought every time his head dropped. Someone shook him awake every time his eyes closed. Alarms screamed as reality twisted. The line between dream and waking world was breaking, and the crew knew the truth. The shadows were not visitors anymore. They were already inside the station, waiting for the final door to open. The station was no longer alive with the sound of work. It was alive with whispers, fear, and the constant hum of alarms. The crew had stopped trusting the silence. They had stopped trusting the dark. And most of all, they had stopped trusting sleep. Ethan sat in the center of the mess hall, his eyes half shut, his body broken. Around him stood the crew, tired but watchful. No one dared leave him alone now, because they all knew. If Ethan slipped too far into sleep, the shadows would come again. For hours they forced him awake. They shouted at him, splashed water on his face, even shocked him with small electric pulses. But his body was losing the fight. Every blink lasted longer. Every breath came slower. The human body was not built for this. Suddenly, the lights above flickered. The sound of the machines dropped into a low growl. Everyone froze. They knew what this meant. Ethan had drifted. "Wake him." The captain barked, shaking Ethan by the shoulders. But Ethan did not wake. His head hung low. His chest rose and fell in slow rhythm. He was already inside the dream. The temperature dropped instantly. Their breath turned white. The walls groaned as if something heavy pressed against them from the outside. Then came the sound. Footsteps not on the floor, but inside the walls. Above the ceiling, under the ground, everywhere. Mark shouted in panic, pointing to the far end of the hall. A shape was forming, not a shadow this time, but something darker than shadow. Something thick, crawling out of the corner like smoke with weight. It stretched tall, almost reaching the ceiling. Long arms dragging along the walls, leaving behind black burn marks. The crew raised their weapons out of instinct. But bullets could do nothing against this thing, everyone knew it. But no one could stand without doing something. The shadow creature tilted its head. As if studying them, it had no face, no eyes, yet they all felt its stare. Their hearts raced, their skin burned with cold. And then it moved. It rushed forward with unnatural speed. One of the crew, a young engineer named Harris, froze in terror before anyone could grab him. The shadow's arm wrapped around him. The lights exploded, sparks rained down. Harris screamed, a sound that tore through the hall. And then in an instant his body was gone, dragged into the blackness, swallowed whole. The shadow vanished with him, leaving only silence. The lights flickered back. The hall was empty again, except for the smell of burned metal and the echo of Harris's scream. The crew stood frozen, no one able to breathe. Dr. Lynn pressed a hand to her mouth, tears in her eyes. He's gone, she whispered. Captain Ramirez slammed his fist on the table, his face pale but his voice sharp. They killed him, right in front of us. They are not waiting anymore. They are coming through. All eyes turned to Ethan. He was awake now, his body shaking, sweat dripping down his face. His lips trembled as he spoke. I told you, they don't stop at dreams, they are hungry, and now they've tasted one of us, Mark shouted, fear breaking his voice. We can't fight this. Guns don't work. Locks don't work. We're trapped. The room erupted in chaos, crew yelling, some crying, some demanding they throw Ethan out before more came. But Captain Ramirez raised his hand, his voice cutting through the noise. Enough. Killing Ethan won't solve this. He's the key. They want him. If he dies, they'll find another way. We must understand why him, and how to stop this. Ethan lifted his head slowly. They chose me, he whispered. I don't know why, but I am the door. And every time I sleep, that door opens wider. They won't stop until the door is fully open. That night, the crew refused to rest. They stayed in groups, keeping the lights burning bright, but even the light felt weak now. Every shadow looked too deep, too dark, too alive. Mark sat near Ethan, his voice low. They took Harris, Ethan. They touched me before, now they've taken him. How many more before this ends? Ethan's eyes stared into nothing. They won't stop until I am gone, but if I go, they will still come. Because once a door is opened, it never closes again, in the distance. Alarms screamed once more. Systems flickered, lights dimmed. The shadows were not waiting for Ethan's sleep anymore. They had already tasted blood, and now they wanted more. The first attack had begun, and it would not be the last. The mining station was filled with fear. Every corridor whispered with memories of Harris's scream. Every shadow felt like it was watching, waiting. The crew moved in silence now, as if even sound might wake the things hiding in the dark. Ethan sat in the medical bay, his body weak, his skin pale. Dark circles under his eyes showed how close he was to collapse. The crew kept him under bright lights. Never alone, never unwatched, but still. The marks kept appearing on the walls, burned handprints, twisted faces, long claw-like scratches. The shadows no longer needed Ethan to fully sleep. Every time he drifted for even a second, they pressed further into reality. Captain Ramirez called the crew together. His voice was rough, his eyes bloodshot. We lost Harris, he said flatly. We will lose more if we don't understand what we are fighting. We need answers. Now Dr. Lynn stepped forward with a data tablet in her hands. I searched the old archives. The mining company bought this station from a failed research group years ago. Most of the files were deleted, but some fragments survived. She tapped the screen, showing strange reports and scattered notes. They spoke about experiments with sleep cycles. They found something in the deep. Records of creatures that live in dreams, they called them. Dream eaters. The crew shifted uneasily. Some whispered, others stared in silence. Mark muttered under his breath. That's what Harris screamed about. They ate him. Dr. Lynn nodded slowly. These beings feed on human sleep. They are drawn to minds that dream too deeply, and once they find a person, that person becomes a door. All eyes turned to Ethan. He sat trembling on the edge of the bed, his voice broke as he whispered, They chose me. The captain frowned, his voice hard. Why you? What makes you the door? Ethan shook his head slowly. I don't know. I never asked for this, but from the first night I saw them, They never left me. Every time I close my eyes, they come closer. Every time I wake, they leave something behind. Mark clenched his fists, anger and fear mixing in his voice. And then what do we do? Keep you awake until you die? That's not a plan. That's suicide for all of us. Dr. Lin hesitated before speaking again. There was one more note in the files. It said, once the Dream Eaters fully cross, they never leave. The only way to stop them is to keep the door closed, but the human body cannot survive without sleep forever. Eventually, the door always opens. Silence filled the room. The truth was worse than any of them wanted to hear. It was not just about saving Ethan. It was about saving themselves if Ethan fell into deep sleep. The station would become their feeding ground, and from there, the entire galaxy. Captain Ramirez slammed his hand on the table. Then we find another way. There must be something the researchers missed. Some way to shut the door for good. But Ethan's weak voice cut through the silence. They are already stronger. They took Harris. They touched Mark. Every night they come closer. You don't understand. They are patient. They don't need to rush. Because I can't fight sleep forever. That night, the crew took shifts guarding Ethan, but everyone could feel the tension building. The station creaked under invisible weight. The shadows seemed to grow darker, stretching longer than the lights should allow. Whispers echoed faintly, too soft to understand, but loud enough to terrify. Mark sat beside Ethan during his shift. He leaned close and asked in a hushed voice, "Do you hear them when you're awake?" Ethan's bloodshot eyes turned to him. "Yes," he whispered. "They whisper from the edge of my thoughts. They promise things. They tell me how sweet it will be. When I finally fall," Mark shivered, looking away, but Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "And sometimes I feel like I'm already halfway there. Like I'm not fully awake anymore. Like I'm still inside their world. Even with my eyes open." The next morning, Dr. Lin brought new files. Her hands shook as she read them aloud. The researchers wrote that once chosen, the dreamer can never be freed. The bond is permanent. If the dreamer dies, the connection doesn't break, it spreads. The shadows attached to the next sleeping mind. Like a disease, gasps filled the room. "So killing Ethan won't save us?" Mark asked. Dr. Lin shook her head. "It will only make it worse." Ethan let out a hollow laugh. "So I am cursed alive, cursed dead, no escape." The crew stared at him with dread. Every option led to doom, keep him alive. And the shadows would keep coming. Kill him, and the curse would spread. Captain Ramirez finally spoke. "We are not giving up. There must be a way to cut the link, to close the door before it opens fully." But as he spoke, the lights above flickered again, the air grew cold, and Ethan's head dropped forward for a second too long. From the corner of the room, a shadow stretched across the floor. Long fingers reaching for them, the truth was clear. Time was running out. The mining station had become a cage of fear. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound in the walls made hearts race. The crew barely spoke anymore, their faces pale. Their eyes hollow from lack of rest, but none were worse than Ethan. His body was almost finished. His hands shook constantly, his skin cold and wet with sweat. Dark bruises formed under his eyes, his lips cracked. He looked less like a man and more like a ghost. And yet he still fought to keep his eyes open. Dr. Lin begged him, "Your heart cannot take this much longer, Ethan. You are shutting down." But Ethan only whispered, "If I sleep, we all shut down. Forever." The crew tried new ways to keep him awake. They blasted loud alarms into his ears. They injected him with stimulants that burned through his veins. They even used pain, sharp shocks, deep cuts to jolt him back whenever his head fell. But every method worked for only a few minutes. Then his body pulled him closer to the edge again. Captain Ramirez watched with grim silence. He knew they were losing the battle. Human flesh had limits. And Ethan was at the very end of his. One night, Mark sat guarding him. Ethan's head dropped forward. His breathing slowing, Mark shook him hard, shouting. But when Ethan's eyes opened, they were not his own. They were black, bottomless, filled with a moving shadow. And when he spoke, it was not his voice. It was many voices, whispering as one. "We are here," the thing said through him. "We are waiting, and soon. We will not wait anymore." Mark stumbled back, terror flooding his chest. "Captain! Doctor, something's inside him." The crew rushed in, weapons raised, but Ethan only smiled weakly, his mouth twisting in a way no human mouth should. "You cannot stop us. He is ours when he falls." "You all fall," Then Ethan screamed, his body convulsing, and when the shadows vanished, his eyes returned to normal. He lay gasping, tears running down his face. I can't hold them back anymore, he whispered. Dr. Lin ran scans of his brain. The screen glowed with strange, violent patterns. His mind is splitting, she said, her voice shaking. It's like there are two signals inside him. One is Ethan, the other something else. The captain gritted his teeth. They're using him as a doorway. Soon they won't need him awake or asleep. They'll simply tear through. The crew argued through the night. Some demanded Ethan be put into cryosleep, sealed away so the shadows couldn't use him. Others shouted that freezing him would only lock the creatures inside the station forever. Ethan listened in silence, his face empty. Finally he spoke, his voice trembling. They don't want me dead. They want me asleep. If you freeze me, I will dream forever, and then they will have all the time they need to crawl into your world. His words silenced the room. The choice was clear. There was no safe path. As hours passed, Ethan grew weaker. His hands trembled so badly he could not even lift a cup. His heart skipped beats, his breath came shallow. Dr. Lin whispered to Ramirez, if this continues, his body will collapse soon. Whether he fights it or not, the captain looked at Ethan. For the first time, Ramirez had no orders. He was watching a man fight an enemy no weapon could kill, and the whole crew was running out of hope. Later, during the midnight cycle, the station went dark for 12 full seconds. When the lights returned, symbols had been burned into the walls, strange, twisting shapes no one could understand. They pulsed faintly as if alive. Ethan stared at them with wide eyes. They are writing their language, he whispered. They are marking their territory. This place is theirs now. The crew felt the truth of it deep inside. The shadows were not visitors anymore. They were settlers, and the station was their new home. Mark grabbed Ethan by the shoulders, desperation in his eyes. Tell us how to fight them. There must be a way. Ethan shook his head slowly. They are not meant to be fought, they are not flesh. Not spirit, not machine, they are hunger, and hunger cannot be killed, it can only be starved. But you can't stay awake forever, Mark whispered. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. That's why I'm losing, and when I lose, you all lose. That night, as the crew tried once more to keep him awake, Ethan began to speak in two voices again. One was his own, weak and broken. The other was cold, dark, endless. He is finished, the shadow voice said. His body is ours. His mind is ours. Soon he will rest, and when he rests, you will never wake again. The crew stared at Ethan, their faces pale with horror. For the first time, they realized the truth. The breaking point was here, and nothing could stop what came next. The station was drowning in silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of fear. Every crew member avoided the shadows on the walls. Every breath felt too loud, every step too heavy. They knew the end was coming. And Ethan knew it too. He sat in the medical bay, his body barely holding together. His hands trembled. His chest rose in shallow gasps. Dark veins spread under his skin like cracks in glass. It was clear he could not last much longer. Dr. Lin whispered to Captain Ramirez. His heart is failing, his brain waves are unstable. If he sleeps now, it will be deep sleep, REM. That's when the dream eaters will take everything. Ramirez's jaw tightened. They were out of time. The crew argued again, desperate voices filling the room. Put him in cryo. Freeze him before it's too late. One shouted, no. Cryo means dreaming forever, we'll all be dead. Another yelled, we should end it now, kill him before the door opens. Ethan heard their words but did not speak. He simply stared at the floor. Finally, his broken voice rose above the chaos. You don't understand. None of you, this was never about saving me. This was about saving yourselves. The crew fell silent. Ethan looked up, his red eyes burning with something between fear and resolve. There's only one choice left, he whispered. And it's mine to make. Mark stepped forward, his voice shaking. What are you talking about? Ethan gave a weak smile, though it carried no joy. They chose me as the door. But a door can only open if it still stands. If I destroy the door, maybe they can't come through. Dr. Lin's eyes widened. You mean, in your own life? Ethan nodded slowly. It's the only way. If I let you kill me, the curse spreads, but if I go on my terms, maybe I can drag them back with me. The crew stared at him in horror. No one wanted to believe that this broken man was their only hope. But deep down they all knew it was true. The station groaned suddenly. The lights flickered, alarms screamed. Shadows spilled across the walls like living rivers. Dozens of twisted forms crawled along the ceiling, their long arms reaching down. The Dream Eaters were no longer waiting. They were already halfway here. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his head. His mouth opened, but two voices poured out, his own and theirs. "Let us in," the shadow voice whispered through him. "Sleep, and we will give you peace, sleep. And we will take the pain away," Ethan screamed, slamming his fists on the floor. "No! You will not have me." The crew backed away in terror as the shadows thickened. Every second Ethan stayed awake. The creatures pressed harder against reality. It was the breaking point. One choice would decide everything. Captain Ramirez grabbed Ethan's arm. "You don't have to do this, soldier. We'll find another way." But Ethan shook his head weakly. "There is no other way. They only need me. As long as I live, they will keep pushing if I go." "Maybe they go too," Mark's voice cracked. "But what if you're wrong? What if they come anyway?" Ethan looked at him with tired eyes. "Then at least I die fighting them." Not feeding them, slowly Ethan stood, his body swaying like a dying flame. He reached for the control panel on the wall. The crew shouted, some tried to stop him. But Ramirez held up his hand, his face grim. "Let him choose," Ethan typed in a command. The screen flashed red. Self-destruct sequence armed gasps filled the room. Dr. Lin shouted, "You'll kill all of us." Ethan turned, his face pale but steady. "If the station burns, the door burns too. Better we die free. Then live as food." The shadows screamed through the walls. The lights burst, sparks showering the room. Ethan dropped to his knees one last time, his eyes closed, his lips moving in a whisper. "Please, don't let me fall asleep," he said weakly. Then louder, almost a roar, "When I sleep, they come, and tonight, I'm taking them with me." His hand slammed the final code into the panel. The station shook, alarms blaring louder than ever. The crew screamed, some begging him to stop. Others frozen in terror. Shadows poured from the ceiling. Reaching for him, they wrapped around his body, twisting, pulling. But Ethan smiled through the pain. For the first time, he looked free. The countdown echoed through the halls. 10, 8. The shadows wailed, their whispers filling every ear. "You cannot escape us. You cannot kill hunger when you sleep. We will still come." The screen faded to black, the last sound, the mix of alarms, screams, and Ethan's broken laugh, and then silence. But in the silence, a whisper remained. Soft, endless, everywhere. "We are here.